Hey guys, thank you for joining us. And likewise, like always, I'm not alone. I'm joined by, I would now call him, I think my anchor guy or my sidekick or the right hand, or I don't know who you want to call him, but I'm with David. And David, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Good to be back.
So what have you been up to?
I've been up to resting, taking a break. My wife, kids have for the first time gone on holiday by themselves. And my wife has had the pleasure and blessing of spending Christmas at home with the dogs. So yeah, we've been celebrating Christmas.
Oh, so the other dogs left and you were left with the
I'm not going, that's your word. This is going to be recorded for eternity.
Yeah.
I'm not going there.
Oh wow. But you rested.
I'm getting there, yeah.
You're getting
2023 was an interesting year.
there.
So I realized I was brain tired.
Yeah.
So it's been good.
Wow.
I'm looking forward to the next year.
Which is really a few days
Next week,
from
this
now.
time, we would be in it. Yeah.
So last time you said that you've already planned for the coming year.
Yeah,
So you just needed to rest the mind.
absolutely.
Fantastic.
I don't know if it rested.
Uh-huh.
If I look at where my laptop is standing.
Yeah. Wow, it's been interesting. 2023 has been, I would say, a year not to forget, but to remember because of many things that actually happened. And from our last time we spoke about good or bad, it has to be a platform to better things. We have to hope for better things.
Yeah.
And believe for a better 2024. And today we pretty much just speaking in highlights about the forecasting of 2024. Also seeing that we have, I don't know if you want to call them, I've been on the streets and they're speaking about the dreaded elections. We will touch a little bit on that. But what are your, in brief, what are your expectations as a person for the coming year?
Well, it's not for world peace and hunger eradication, and I don't mean that facetiously because that's not going to happen in the next year. But we should certainly focus on it. And I'm not making light of it. You know, it's like the standard beauty contest answer: world peace and no unhappy children. I have huge expectations for 2024. Firstly, because we've got elections. But secondly, or hand in hand with that, Q, is the fact that at least 40 other countries are also having elections. So-called democratic countries. So that means about, I think last number I looked at was about 2 billion people will be voting in 2024. So I've seen some estimates saying it's up to 4 billion.
Wow.
So it's going to be interesting to see where the world's going and who they will be voting for, given what we've seen over the last number of years. So I'm looking forward to see what's going to come out there. Obviously in our own country, to see what happens here. We all know that we need change desperately, and we spoke about it the last time. So from a political front, it'll be interesting to see what happens. But more globally, because of the impact of, or shall I call it, the danger that democracy is in at the moment. And then, you know, what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Israel at the moment. Those are two things that I think will keep our attention, and certainly will keep my attention as well. And the reason it'll keep my attention is who will be doing the right thing. It's not about taking sides about who's right and wrong, but who's going to do the right thing, and how the world will play a role in that. And South Africa is one of them. How are we going to influence what's happening?
Wow. I love that.
That's number 2. Number 3 is the decisions we're going to be taking this year that will impact us in 20, 30, 40 years from now.
Wow.
And those are more, shall we call it, micro things that we do on a day-to-day basis. And in there is a whole, shall we call it, an ostrich egg. So those will be the immediate things for me. And then I'm positive about the business world. I'm positive about South Africa. We've reached the high of interest rates, but it doesn't mean that it's going to come down quickly. But when I speak to business owners, the world that we work in, there's a positivity that we haven't seen for a long time. About 2024.
Wow, I want to ask something. You touched something there. In terms of investor confidence, seeing that we're coming into a time of elections, and man, we could talk all night. I actually wanted to ask you about, we call ourselves a democratic state. And so in terms of investor confidence in the coming year, what would you say about that, seeing that we also are having elections?
Kyo, I think the challenge that we have with investors at the moment is that we're talking about Africa,
Mm-hmm.
and in Africa we've got 50 states,
Mm-hmm.
depending on who you listen to.
Mm-hmm.
But the point that I'm trying to make here is Africa is first of all a number of countries.
Mm-hmm.
That's the first thing. The second thing is Africa does not work like the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And let's put it into, I was almost want to say derogatory terms, where Africa is still a developing
Mm-hmm. The young
continent.
Yes.
And within that, we've got multiple countries at very different stages.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at AI, for example,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the world is talking about AI.
Mm-hmm.
But the question is the world really speaking about AI, or is it more the developed, so-called developed countries? So your Europe,
Mm-hmm.
your America. And if you apply that to South Africa, or to Africa, we've got different stages.
Mm-hmm.
If you just look at South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
we've got, you know, maybe a 70-year-old lady, 80-year-old lady that grew up in apartheid, that still lives in the northern part of KZN
Mm-hmm.
in the same conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got somebody her same age
Mm-hmm.
living in Sandton.
Yes.
Those are two very different worlds in the same
Mm.
country.
Mm.
So the solutions that we are bringing, or that we should be bringing to a country like South Africa,
Mm-hmm.
must take into account that that's the world that we live in. Now expand that into Africa as well.
Okay.
Yeah. And we're fast getting to 1 billion people in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got these different worlds, different economies on the continent.
Mm-hmm.
But what I found in the previous life working in Africa is that people that invest in Africa
Mm-hmm.
come with a mindset typically of this is the way we do it, and now we're going to bring that into your country, and these are the conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
We can't do that. And many investors. And let me identify, or maybe define what I mean by investor. I'm not talking about your big banks or those
Mhm.
kind of guys, because typically they'll come in and they'll say this is the way we do it.
Yeah.
But that's also one of the reasons why we see the development in the financial world, for example, where more and more unbanked people now have access
Mhm.
to, let's call it the payment system, not
Yes.
necessarily the banking system,
Mhm.
because that's also a difference.
Yes.
More and more, because there are limitations that are brought in by the bigger companies.
Mm-hmm.
So the investor that wants to come into Africa from all sizes
Mm-hmm.
must understand
Uh-huh.
that this is Africa. It's
Mhm.
not America, it's
Mhm.
not North America, and it's
Mhm.
not Europe, and
Yeah.
it's not a developed.
Mhm.
It's an opportunity to
Mhm.
invest in.
Yes.
They need to see it like that.
Mm-hmm.
We've become, I think, too soft when it
Mhm.
comes to investments. We want everything to be perfect.
Mhm.
That's not what investment. Let's go back 300 years.
Mm-hmm.
How did the States come about?
Mm-hmm.
You know, people traveled from the Europe to the States,
Mhm.
and because that was the land of milk and honey.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, people would take risk, not silly risk. I'm not talking
Mhm.
about silly risk, but they would take risk with an expectation. Now, early on, you spoke about hope.
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're going to make an investment into Africa, we have to understand. People that are going to invest in Africa
Mhm.
have to understand that you've got to take a 50, 100, 200-year view.
Mm-hmm.
And we used to do that.
Mm. But let me hold you there, David. As much as these entities are coming for an opportunity, would you actually not say then it is our responsibility to at least create a conducive atmosphere, a conducive platform for that engagement to at least begin to happen? I'm still going to take you back to the politics of the day. But is it not Africa's duty to provide that conducive atmosphere for the investors to at least come?
And that's, in my view, challenge number one.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, there's still a perception, and maybe it is a reality,
Mhm.
and I think in some places it definitely is a reality, that, let's speak about South Africa, because this is where we live.
Mhm.
And I've traveled to many countries in Africa, but that's traveling, that's not living there. But in South Africa, outsiders perceive us to be entitled.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't, this is what outsiders see us.
Mhm.
We don't want to work for stuff, we want to
Mhm.
be given stuff.
Mhm.
Now, as an investor,
Mm-hmm.
investment doesn't mean I'm going to give you something for you to use.
Yes.
It says I'm going to give you something to use it
Mhm.
and then make more out of it.
Yeah.
And part of that more,
Mm-hmm.
I want.
Yes. Yes.
That's investment. You take 100 Rand, you put it into a fixed deposit account. At the end of the month or at the end of the year, you're going to get 10 Rand back, 10%. But that 10 Rand comes to them. So South Africans need to create that environment. And you've touched on an important point, because we live, and we can call it generational gaps, we can call it whatever. But the point is, we have an overall culture where we are not creating that environment where people sit on the outside and say, I want to invest in. Think about it. People want to invest in Apple.
Yeah.
Why? Because they believe it to be a great company. Why? Because of what they've done in the past.
Yes.
iPads, iPhones, let's just use them as one example.
Yes.
Microsoft, Tencent, it doesn't matter. You invest in a business because you see hope. You see that this thing is going to go back. Now, we all know that hope is something that we believe in, it can't be guaranteed. But in the absence of hope, we're all dead.
Yeah.
Internally, we're dead. But to come back to your point, we have to create an environment that's conducive, that's accepting investment. Would you, at the moment, sitting outside of South Africa, invest in South Africa based on what I just told you?
I wouldn't.
And that's the point. And we South Africans, we were here, born and raised. So 100%, we have to create that environment, and it's going to start, and it has to start, with the elections next year. We've got to give the world a reason. Because if we don't change, it's just the same thing, and we're just going to carry on with the same. And the problem we're going to have is like what we've seen in South Africa over the last 3 decades, is that rather than raise the bar, we are lowering the bar. And let me explain that by a practical thing. You know, there was a time where when there was a pothole, it would be filled properly.
Yeah.
When a white line was painted on a road, it would last for a year, 2 years. Now it doesn't last 3 months. So there's this show of things happening, but it's kind of like just enough to keep people, you know, just, we've done it. Done it. So we're living in South Africa at the moment where if something breaks, then we say, well, that's the new standard. That's the bar now. As long as it doesn't break more. And be happy that you've got something.
Yes.
Now again, an investor doesn't want that, because it says to me, if I give you something, you're going to take it to your lowest level. That's not what I want. I invest with the idea to uplift, to raise the bar. That's not what we're seeing in South Africa at the moment. But there are a lot of green spots out there. So let's not be just negative.
Yeah, I like that, because imagine this, David. You have a guest coming, you have a visitor coming in your home. You don't expect the visitor to come clean your home, do you? You clean your home anticipating the visit.
Exactly.
So I think the mindset that we have, which we must change going forward, is no one is coming to help us. Even the investments that are coming in, they are not to help us. Because many a time we are waiting for outside people to come clean our nonsense. I think first thing that we have to do is to own that responsibility, to say we have to clean up before the visitors actually arrive. And I like what you said, that 2024 is a good year for us to begin to really address some of those things. And I wanted to ask you, there are a lot of parties. So I went to the streets like always, and there's a thought that is going around saying, why bother voting if the same party or parties are going to win anyway? If they don't win fairly, they will rig. What are your thoughts?
So we had this discussion, or similar discussion, in our first podcast. Let's go back to the example of you've got to, before your guests arrive, you've got to clean the house.
Yes.
If you own a house already, or when you are in the process of buying a house, and it doesn't matter where it is, how big or small the house is, the current owners of the house will always clean that house to make it look good for you when you arrive.
Yes.
And when you, as a prospective buyer, arrive and it doesn't look good, you will not even go in.
True.
So park that picture there. Now think about voting in South Africa. There's a lot of parties, and there's always going to be a lot of parties. And there are many. Germany is on track to by 2050 be the 5th biggest economy on the planet from a GDP, but there are multiple parties. So it's not that it doesn't work. It's that they don't have selfish politicians.
Mm-hmm.
That's the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Democracy works.
Yes.
But the way that democracy currently is applied or utilized or abused in South Africa by politicians is the problem in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Why do I say that? Because they simply don't take the people into account.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are many political parties out there, but the number of political parties that, let's say, started in the last couple of months, when you listen to them, it's all about caring about the people.
Mm-hmm.
When you listen to the older parties, it's all about stuff that the 80-year-old lady grew up with.
Mm-hmm.
And it's about skin of your color.
Mm-hmm.
You put it differently. It's reminding people about the things that they don't have.
Uh-huh.
It's reminding them about the people that do have. But it doesn't say, okay, this is how, together we're going to make it better.
Mm-hmm.
The new political parties, certainly the ones that I've listened to,
Mm-hmm.
they aim more and more on, but how do we make this work collectively?
Yeah.
Now, we can use a number of examples in the world where when people focus on the haves and the have-nots and the skin color and the this and the that, that there's never going to be unity. One of the problems we have in South Africa is that as a country, we don't have a common goal. We don't have that unity. And the common goal for South Africans should be, which political party am I going to place my hope in?
Uh-huh.
Because when we voted for the ANC 30 years ago, it was with the hope that they will do stuff. But they broke the hope. So at what point do we change, or do we move on, not change, move on, and say, well, that hope it's, what shall I call it, misinvested. It shouldn't be invested in. It's the wrong investment. Because when we invest, and that investment doesn't give us over time what we expected, we take our money and we invest it somewhere else. We should do the same with our vote. The problem is that we don't take the time and make the effort to equip ourselves, to educate ourselves about, one, what is it that I want? And then, which political party at the moment do I believe the most? Am I going to put my hope in? Now people will say, oh, but this party has never run, that party. So go and look at the people behind it. Look at the people in that party and say, okay, are these people, for example, let me make it very simple. The people in that political party, are they people that I'd like to take for a cup of coffee, drink a glass of wine, tap into their brain? Or do they resonate with me?
But David, can you separate the people running the party from the party itself?
But that's what we need to do. So we need to go in and say, I'm not going to vote for this party because they say this. Because who's they? They are I want to say, this person that says, I'm going to stand up in your ward, or I'm going to put my name up for the president, or whatever. I want to look at that individual and go, what is the impression I get of this person? But in all spheres, we're not doing that. And it comes back to that entitlement thing where either people have been so disappointed that they say, well, now I'm going to do nothing.
Yeah.
Or they just say, well, it's not my problem. And South Africa is pretty much there. It's not my problem, or it doesn't help me to vote, which is the biggest mistake we can make. So that hope that you spoke about earlier is put your vote where your hope is for the future. But then you don't give your money to an investor and then walk away from it.
Yeah.
You meet with them regularly. You read the papers. You see what's happening to your investment. Is it giving you the return? What's the short-term, medium-term, long-term views? And you keep in it. We don't do that with politicians in South Africa. We don't hold them accountable. So when you put your hope into a political party, make sure that that hope is in the people that say. And then when you vote for them, make sure that you hold them accountable. And what does accountability mean? Rather than watching a TV show once a month, just attend a meeting. It's just, you're going to spend your time in any case. So just spend it where you've invested your future.
Wow. Wow. David, this is sobering. But I have a question for you. The small parties, can they be trusted?
You've got to find out for yourself. Because what do we trust? Think about it. There's such a trust deficit in the world at the moment, Q. I just finished watching a documentary about the reason for the financial collapse in 2008. And just looking at that, you should never invest in the financial market because people were just not listening. They were so greedy. And when you go back and you look at how it started and the reasons people put things in place, it's because there was no accountability. There weren't people holding them accountable. Accountability just simply says that if somebody says they're going to do something, ask them why they did. Are they going to keep on doing it? But on the flip side, ask them why didn't they do it? And what are they going to do about it? And here's the thing. How can we help them? Because we don't do that, how can we help you thing. We stand back and say, well done, or they didn't do it, as opposed to saying, but it's my future. It's my future that we're talking about here. It's my kids, it's my grandchildren, it's their children. We don't do that. So the smaller parties, well, there's been a few smaller parties that's been around for some time. The problem is not the small party. The problem is our attitude in terms of saying, where do I place my hope? Because if a new company starts now, and they have a phenomenal growth, and you really believe in what they're doing, and you can see what's coming down the line in terms of hope, will you stay invested in Apple? Or will you diversify or move into this and see what's going to happen here? No, you're not going to stay there. So you've got to place that hope, that belief that you're going to get a better investment in the smaller party, provided you've done the homework, that you say, the party versus this small party, big party. Small party person, big party person, because ultimately it's about the people. Do I trust them with my hope? And then vote for that party. If it happens to be a small party, fantastic. If it's not a small party, well, but choose. Don't sit back and just say, well, I've invested in this party, I've invested in Apple, but Apple, I can see it's coming down, it's actually about to go into bankruptcy, but I'm just going to keep on investing because that's what we
invested with him.
And that's exactly what we're doing. I've invested with Apple all my life, and this is not a knock on Apple. I've invested with Apple all my life, or I've invested with Standard Bank, or I've invested with Tencent. I'm going to stay there. And you can see, but it's not working. So won't you change your investment strategy? Won't you take your money out? Money in this case is just, so are you going to take your vote to somebody else?
So is it a case of, I better stick to the devil that I know, or the angel that I don't know?
Well, again, I'm going to refer you to, if Apple is on a downslide and something else is looking pretty good over the medium to long term, are you going to stick with the devil? And
I know this devil.
But that's so this devil, you can see, is going to take you down.
What if the angel is worse?
Well, your point is very good. Let's make it practical. All we need to do is ask the average South African today to look back 10 years and see if things overall are better for them individually. Because we do have some of the bigger political parties that will try and convince us that they've done a good job. Now let's not make a mistake. I've said this before. We can't blame the big political parties for everything that's wrong in South Africa. We also, as South Africans, we also have to take part of the blame, if you want to call it blame, because we didn't hold them accountable. We did not say, we can see you going down this line, we're going to vote another way. We didn't do that. We just said, no, carry on. Q, today we have a challenge, and these things have been spoken of ad nauseam. Eskom, water, roads, harbour, housing, education, medical, all of those things today, in general, are worse than what they were. They are worse. But now, what the bigger political parties do is they show us the bits and pieces of where things are looking good. And I use that term very specifically, looking good. So, you have to put yourself out there and go and find out and say, I've got to move my investment because it's not paying off. The saddest thing that I heard at the end of November, and allow me to go into the skin color, was two young ladies, not white. They are in their 20s. That said to me, David, our parents are telling us they were better off under apartheid. And that's why we will not vote the way we did before. And I turn 58 next year. I never experienced apartheid in the sense that I'm not a black person that grew up there. But I know about apartheid and I saw what it did. And I said to them, you should never, ever think like that. But they said, what's the alternative? They asked me, David, what's the alternative? Because my grandmother says to me, I could get onto a bus. There was a bus that ran on time and I was safe. 10 o'clock at night. The road wasn't broken. I could take that same bus on a fixed road. And maybe it wasn't a tar road, but even the gravel road was better. and I could go to a hospital that was working. That's wrong. That young people are saying we were better under apartheid when they didn't live apartheid.
Wow.
So imagine that hope. That their hope is that let's go back to where we were, because what we hear now when people are talking about what they are experiencing now says that was better. Now, it wasn't better, make no mistake. But that's part of the reason I believe that the young generation says, well, it doesn't matter what we do, nobody's listening to us. Because we're hearing about all of these nightmare stories around us. So what does it help me to get involved? And that's the biggest mistake. So you spoke about the devil versus the angel. That's the devil speaking. I'm a Christian, so I'm always going to refer back to it. But that's the bad side of it. Christian, no Christian, I don't care what you're... But if you're going to go for this, you must understand it is, to your earlier point, it's going one way. And that's worse and worse and worse and worse.
Wow.
So small parties, big parties, do your homework. Go and find out. But whatever you do, don't just sit and go,
I like that, because at the end of the day, even when you do look at the smaller parties, I think you mentioned it, do your homework, do your research, bring their feet to the fire, ask the relevant questions, because you have the old folk that are sort of like hanging on to a sinking ship, the younger folk saying nothing changes, even if we do vote, nothing changes. But then there is a new trend of personnel. We're not talking about people moving from certain parties to start smaller parties. But then their track record isn't that good, because it's one of those nightmarish things in Africa where the failed Minister of Agriculture is now the Minister of Police, and then they fail to be the Minister of Police next year, or in the 3 years' time, they're now Minister of International Affairs. They fail there, but they are never replaced. So they have a track record of failure. Now they're moving on to start smaller parties, promising hope that they couldn't achieve with the bigger parties.
I think that's one of the good things about politics and business is that if I'm not happy with what I'm seeing and experiencing, I can move. I can either move to another, join them, or I can start my own. Think business. Think about business. How many businesses have started because people said, I think I can do this better, or I'm disillusioned or whatever. And they started small. They had a vision, they had hope. Every business starts with that vision, that hope, that belief that I can do this better, or I'm going to do this when it's never been done before. Think of a Facebook, think of Apple, think of Microsoft. And I use those terms because those are the things that the younger people that are used to. But the younger people forget, or they don't even know, that Netflix, Apple, Microsoft, these big names started off in places like varsity dorm rooms, garages. That's where they started. There was a time where they were small. Why do I mention it? Everything usually, most things usually start small. Let's go back to the example or the discussion we had earlier about, there's one thing about the party, business, versus the individual, owners, managers, etc. So you don't just go into this business. You also want to know who's running it. What's the track record of these guys? So let the political people move around.
That's right.
Because sometimes they move because they are disillusioned. And they bring experience and. Just make sure that when you vote, whether you vote for the new or the small or the old and small, because remember there are lots of old, small as well, that the people are the same people that you would trust with your payslip. Because that's ultimately what we do. So whether we invest in a political party by way of a vote, or whether we invest by working in an organization or for an organization, or whether we invest by giving money and hoping on a return, it's not as simple as just saying, well, I'm going to go there or there. You've got to do some homework, find out why. And it's not just about the party. It's not just because it's Apple. It's about what are these guys inside saying, and can I hold them accountable? Are they delivering on what they say? So again, it doesn't matter. You have to look at the people. So let them start the small organizations, because big companies were once small. But the people that run those organizations hold them accountable.
Wow. Well, David, this has been amazing, and from the look of things, we've got a jam-packed season coming in, and I just want one last thought. So the just ended World Cup, Rugby World Cup, our theme was Stronger Together.
Yeah.
As a nation, in South Africa, could we and can we be stronger together without equality?
We're going to have to talk about equality.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's such an emotive thing most of the times, where we must understand that equality doesn't exist anywhere in the world, in the definition of some people. But when we look at what equality means, it's going to differ from person to person. And part of that problem, I would say, is education. Because we don't talk about, and what do I mean by that? Let me just go micro level. If people in South Africa, a huge portion of them, can't read with comprehension today, do you think they'll even understand the word equality? And I'm not insulting them. Do they understand what equality means? Because equality, one definition I'll put on the table is equality says everybody must have the same access to.
Yes. That's it.
That's it. That's all it says. Everybody must have the same access to. Now, they must have the same access to be able to go to a school and be taught how to read and write. But they can't have the same access to become medical doctors if, given the same circumstances, they are not meant to be doctors, or they are not meant to be accountants, or they are not meant to be somebody that works on a car's engine. So what does equality mean? Equality has nothing to do with skin color.
That's true.
It has nothing to do with skin color. What we do is we try and create inequality because we're selfish, and then we bring in things like age. Skin color is just one form of discrimination. Age, David, you wear glasses, sorry you can't do this work. David, you're colorblind, sorry you can't do this work. David, you this, David, you that. If we want to find a reason to not include somebody, we'll find it. There's no doubt about that. We'll never have enough laws to stop that. Which brings me to this point. It's a human thing. We need to understand that we are all equal the second we are born. But we are always born into different environments. Different environments. So as long as we can start with good education, and I'm not talking about the education we have at the moment, good education, where kids have access to a school, access on a road that is not full of potholes, on a safe road where kids don't get raped on the way there or in school like we're seeing at the moment. And people do that because they don't understand the consequences. And if they do understand the consequences, they don't care because they know we've got a police force at the moment that's so overwhelmed with everything that's going on because the leadership from the highest levels is just bad. So the criminals at the moment don't care, but the criminals raise criminals again. It takes a village to raise a child. So equality just says, and I'm repeating this, we all need to have the same access, but we also have to understand that is never going to be the case. We should strive for it. Because the guy that gets born in Sandton, and I'm picking on Sandton, it can be Las Vegas, the Hamptons in the States. That person versus the person that gets born in a very poor area, whether you're white or black, pink, purple, yellow, doesn't matter. They've got different battles. They've got different battles. But we must also remember that yes, this guy has a better chance than this guy, make no mistake. But we also have the situation where you've got two siblings. One makes it, one doesn't. One makes it, one doesn't. So there's a human part of that as well, which comes back again to, it takes a village to raise a child. And South Africa is a village, and we must all play our part. And we must all play our part individually. When we see something happening on the ground, we must hold people accountable. If I experience inequality in whatever form that might be, what am I doing about it?
I love that.
What am I doing about it on a day-to-day basis? If I hear somebody telling a racist joke, or a joke about fat people, skinny people, tall people, doesn't matter. What am I doing? Am I participating? Am I walking away, or am I in a gentle but very firm way telling people that, that's really not what we should, that's not what we aim for. That's not what we aim for. Because discrimination, inequality, exists whether you are white or black or yellow or pink or purple, inside those groups even. So how do we get to equality? Your question was, can we get to this country when there's, without equality? Yes, because we must always strive for equality. And when we all understand that I am because of you, and you are because of me, then we're going to do that. And it's a simple thing. Just do to other people the way that you want them to do to you.
Fantastic.
That's it.
Wow, David, this has been, like always, amazing. And thank you so much. And wow, equality, very possible. Stronger together, that's a goal that we can certainly achieve.
Yeah.
As long as we believe that tomorrow is brighter. It is said that insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. You want to see different results in your life, no matter what space, stage, or frames of that life, do something differently. You and I, you've got 365 days. What you do with that is entirely up to you. But don't come at the end of the year and blame me for using my time very wisely. This has been very informative. David, once again, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate you.
See
Thank
you
you very much.
next time.